My name is Eric Conrad. Welcome to my talk. A little bit about me. I'm a father, and I run a small company called Backshore Communications. And we do pen testing, incident handling, that kind of stuff. And lately, a lot of hunt teaming. In fact, my work shifted to mostly blue now. I probably spend 1/3 of my time red teaming, 2/3 blue teaming. Yeah, come on, squeeze in. Some other folks want to get in, so would appreciate that. There's an empty seat. Thank you. So I saw, Carlos's talk yesterday about purple teaming, and that's what I've been doing. We call it catch me if you can. If there's extra time at the end of a pen test, we'll do value add, where we sit down with their SOC and show them all the things they missed and show them the events to look at. And then if there's still time left, we'll come back in again, unannounced, and pretty much rerun the same thing we did previously, seeing if that was effective. And usually the second time in, same thing, they don't see it. And then the executives start asking hard questions about what the SOC's actually doing all day. And we always try to rescue that SOC and not have it get shut down, outsourced, et cetera. This talk was inspired by another talk I did. I do want to point out, this code's already on GitHub. Check it out. If you go to my site, ericconrad.com, the first hit is a copy of this talk. You can download the talk, the slides. You can download the code, download all the EVTX files I generated for this talk, and look at them. Even if you don't use my tools, use the EVTX files, ingest them into your SIM, see what happens. If the SIM says nothing, it's wrong. So all this stuff's online. I wanted this to be as actionable as possible, Monday morning value, and it's real easy, ericconrad.com, or just Google my name. I'm usually the first hit. And if you go there, there's a link to the GitHub site, and here's the GitHub site. So I was updating the code as of yesterday. I was watching some of the talks here on PowerShell and new techniques, and a talk tomorrow and invoke obfuscation that caught my eye on Twitter. And I've been updating the tool to catch this stuff. So I want this stuff to be as actionable as possible. Whether you use the tool or not, the techniques described can be used in many SIMs. All right. And other walks of life, I'm a senior SANS instructor. I'm co-lead of the Blue Team Operations Curriculum, author of the CISP Study Guide and 11th Hour Guide. So again, links to all the talks and the EVTX files. You can download this stuff, use it, play with it. All the EVTX files, well, the shorter ones, there are some that are called many-dash events. That was me just beating on a Windows 7 VM relentlessly for weeks, really. And the big ones are all that stuff. And those are malice, but lots of normal system events. The shorter ones, like the ones with Metasploit and PowerSploit in front of them, those are very narrow in that I'll clear the event log, attack the system, say export the log. So those are very, very actionable. The signal to noise ratio is very high. And again, if you feed these into your SIM or whatever, and they don't catch stuff, well, you need to dig deeper. And I love your feedback, obviously, in GitHub, pull requests. This is, I'll call it a good beta 0.1 version, a good proof of concept, but there's certainly tons of room for improvement, including the output engine right now is very, very basic, but it demonstrates the point that I believe it works. So here's a quote I think about a lot, Louis Brandeis, of Brandeis University fame. Sunlight is the best disinfectant. And he said that, well, I'm paraphrasing. His was a bit longer, this is a little punchier. And I think about that, the red team and the blue team, prevention, and the all-prevent defense that we see time and time again. Fortune 5000 has warmly embraced the all-prevent defense, set and forget a mentality, appliances, services, shiny boxes, and they're all failing. Virtually all of them are failing. We're spending more money than we ever have at InfoSec. In fact, if you've been around a while like I have, I'm starting to get scared a little bit. It's starting to feel a little frothy, a little bubbly to me, and having been through a previous bubble that left some scars. So the money's flooding in, the technology's flooding in, but basic lessons still aren't learned, such as know thy network. And the stubborn refusal by most of Fortune 5000 to refuse to learn that network boggles my mind. It just boggles my mind. And there's no know thy network as a service provider out there. You have to learn it. You have to have skin in the game. You have to want to defend that thing. And as Lee Holmes pointed out, defense is hard. Breaking stuff's easy. And don't get me wrong, I love breaking stuff. Pen testing, it's unbridled joy. Well, the pen testing itself, not the report writing of the travel. But other than that, it is unbridled joy to hack stuff and have people pay me to hack stuff. And I enjoy that, truly. That expression of hacking in a more true sense is wonderful, but breaking stuff is easy and fixing stuff is hard. And as I get older and hopefully a little more wiser, I'm drawn more to fixing stuff. It's a harder challenge. You know, as the 100th pen test in a row or a shock and awe campaign, it's still fun, don't get me wrong, but I want to make a difference. And I come back a year later to that same company and do the same things, or a week later, when I tell them, here's exactly what I did this, I did this, I did this, I did this, and they still miss it. One of the things we see is compliance sims, compliance socks. You know, if you serve the gods of compliance exclusively, you will fail. Compliance is not security. If you draw a Venn diagram of compliance and security, compliance is partly inside and partly outside the security bubble, and it's much smaller, right? And so if you have these compliance socks, we had a client, 10,000 systems running some sort of a McAfee or semantic endpoint protection suite, each generating over 1,000 logs a day times 10,000 devices, all in a one SIM. So if you're just hammering your SIM, so 1,000 plus logs per day, this is uninfected systems I'm talking about, right? Times 10,000 systems, you're shoveling all that into a giant compliance SIM that sometimes my clients have spent north of $1 million on this kind of technology. And one of the things most SIM vendors and consultants do, and if you're doing this, please stop, you build it, you tend to grab the biggest buckets of the easiest data. We have a connector for this, we have a connector for that. You shovel the data in. There's no real use case for malice versus non-malice. And then towards the end of the engagement, the client says, so what event should we look for? And here's what most consultants say. Hey, that's for you to decide. You need to decide what's important to you. But no, what should we look for? Like, give me an event ID. No. You should decide that. The consultant leaves with more money in their pockets. The client has no idea what to do. And they struggle. You throw a kid in a sock, copy.
Hi folks, I'm Geek here. Unfortunately, audio drops out to about the 9-minute, 12-second mark. Sorry for the inconvenience.
PowerShell team to the rescue. PowerShell team to the rescue.
All right. Hey, online folks, I'm sorry, we had a layer one issue, so now resolved. So if you're online, I was just kind of freestyling on this slide. We didn't miss much. So these are the events you look for. So the talk that inspired this was that deadly events, and then we need to dig deeper, right? We need to go deeper and look deeper. It turns out Metasploit creates random service names like this because they're avoiding blacklisting. If it was Met SVC every time, some enterprising blacklisting vendor would blacklist that thing, right? So they randomly generated, but it turns out it's 16 characters long, upper, lower only, alpha only, right? And it's easy for a human to spot that, but I don't want a human to look at every service creation event, right? And you can look at all service creation events, but that's going to be noisy, right? So what do? We start looking for patterns. And luckily, PowerShell, the regex support is strong. I've been doing regexes for a long time. It is solid. It is not quite Perl strong, but it's Python strong, meaning it's still awesome, right? I think Perl is the best expression, old school, I know, old man Conrad. I know, my cold dead hands and all that. But regex's support on PowerShell is robust. That's what drew me deeper down the PowerShell labyrinth, was the regex support. I'm like, this is pretty awesome, a little unexpectedly awesome, cool. And thus began my voyage of an old school Unix dude learning PowerShell. So we've seen an evolution of payloads, and as Lee pointed out yesterday, PowerShell isn't giving, it's all post-exploitation we're primarily seeing, right? So the vector, the exploit is in PowerShell. PowerShell is just there afterwards, right? And it's better than CMD, it's better than VB script, it's better than all that stuff. But saying malware uses PowerShell on Windows is like saying malware uses Bash on Linux. You know, it's there, it's the shell. It's an awesome shell, right? And so we've evolved now. The corporate antivirus solutions have like a goal line defense against dropping that fat EXE and running it. So all your corporate defenses, your typical preventive defenses, are like this goal line defense. Don't let that EXE drop. Watch for that thing. And that's a pretty easy use case. So the old native upload for Metasploit, right? And so now they're migrating to PowerShell. PowerShell because it's there. PowerShell because it's whitelisted if you are using whitelisting. PowerShell because it's used mostly, of course, by benign software. And there's not a lot of logging by default. Easy to fix though, right? And again, they don't touch the file system. They run a big long command like this. This is Metasploit's interpreter, dropping with the newer style PowerShell target. So if you choose target PowerShell, which is now default 0, it'll do this. And that thing is long, as you see. And once you see it, now you're not going to see this by default. However, once you turn on some additional logging, which I recommend, you will. And it stands out like the nose in your face. That is a base 64 encoded, well, first compressed, then base 64 encoded command line that it turns out is over 2,400 bytes. It does a bunch of stuff. It's a hidden window, no profile. Often we see this exact thing with CMD launching PowerShell, which is great actually, because it gives us more visibility. You know, sunlight is the best disinfectant. Inevitably, our preventive tools will lag, right? Prevention will always lag the latest, greatest attacks. Because the only reason we have those preventive controls is attacks happen, they work, we study the use case, months later, years later, here's a tool, right? And here's a prevention. But what I realized, you have to be more nimble. And one of the things I'm very lucky at, I was talking to Randy Marchani, who's CSO of Virginia Tech University. I spent 2.5 years working at Boston University in the 90s. Every InfoSec professional would benefit from like a 2-year tour of duty at a .edu. You really will. You can't block it all. Stuff's coming in. And when you realize you have to be tactical, you have to be nimble. You know, compromise is not the end, it's the beginning, right? It's the beginning of the fight. And that fight to me is very, very interesting, right? So this is once you see it, it jumps out at you. So giant command, PowerShell launched by CMD. As I mentioned previously, compressed and base 64 encoded function. Once you unwrap all that, here's what you get. So here's what's actually happening. It's a PowerShell function. I know it's an eye chart, but I was trying to press upon you the size of all this via the command line. Again, there's no file in the system. There's nothing for AV to squash on the file system yet. Now, I may change that later, of course, right? And the function names are randomly generated. It looks quite odd. And again, the EVTX files I shared on GitHub are full of this stuff. So you want to have a higher fidelity view, dive into it, get win events, filter hash table. You know, you'll see this stuff very, very clearly. Here's PowerShell, PowerSploits rather. Everyone's favorite tool, of course, is Mimikatz. Anyway, I get Mimikatz going, I'm getting Mimikatz going. I think Mandiant M-Trends 2015 said that in virtually every engagement we have, PowerShell was dropped on the system, right? So the attackers are running PowerShell for all the obvious reasons you want to, plain text passwords, golden ticket attacks, all that kind of stuff. So we want to watch for this, and there's a couple of ways to do it. You can just do the net.web client, which is one way to leave no footprints, or less footprints. And it's a way to basically download a script and run it. And you might say, okay, if I see PS1 being downloaded, the problem is it doesn't have to be PS1. So below that is a short URL. It's actually, that's one of my web servers that I use, and I have a file called 17. It's not actually a redirect, it's an actual download. It's a file called 17 that contains a copy of invoke Mimikatz. And so there's no PS1. It's a fairly short command, but it uses this net web client download string, which is an equivalent to, say, curl or wget or fetch, except on Windows now, native built-in functionality. So why the attack framework's doing this? It works, and it's pretty invisible. And you can get super advanced tools, and I love some of the advanced talks, but my mind keeps going back to where the rubber meets the road. What does my average client have? It doesn't have that special snowflake that John Strand referenced in last hour's talk, right? You don't have that magic snowflake. You don't have that ninja like me or you. You got an average person trying to get through a day, right? So what can I recommend for them? And we can say, oh, get Silence, get Sentinel-1, get Carbon Black, and they don't, they have much, much more basic needs, And I'm drawn to that problem, because everyone was there. At one point, I was a clueless noob, and everyone else was too in this room, right? And I'm drawn to that, and I want to help that person. I want that person to be successful, because ultimately, it's really not that hard. And that's what kills me. All these billions of dollars just flushing away, going to really bad places. Like, one of the things about cybercrime, where does that money go? Bad places. Bad things happen with that money. And I think about that as a moral issue. Most people don't, but I do. And I want to help that person. And so what recommendations can I make on Windows 7? Now, the easiest recommendation is say go to 10. Yes, of course. Yeah, yes, just go to 10. Okay, thanks. That'll be $10,000, please, and I'll leave now. You're not being a good consultant by saying that, because my clients still have XP. Some do. But Windows 7, it's solid. It lacks some of the features that Windows 10 has. I have to give mad props to Microsoft for Emmet. Emmet's just amazing. You're not using Emmet, you're making a mistake. It's amazing. And Microsoft could have been all like, yeah, you want the new cool stuff? Windows 10. And they didn't say that, though. They said, you know what? We'll backport this stuff. We'll backport all this stuff, heap spray detection, ROP stuff, back to Windows 7. And that's beautiful. That's beautiful. So I wanted a sweet spot for actionable stuff you can do back at work on Monday without having to install a whole bunch of stuff or buy anything, right? I like, quote, living off the land. As consultants, we have to live off the land, right? So let's live off the land. The single most awesome event of recent interest is full native command line logging on Windows 7 natively. It is amazing. It's about a year and a half old-ish, and it's not default settings. You have to change two things, but on my client sites, and not all of them have the ninjas I mentioned, it works. Like, I didn't have to do anything other than, well, these two things, right? I didn't have to do anything. And I can say make 2 GPO changes in book. Now I have event 4688, and this event is beautiful. Here it is. Now, there's one caveat. It logs everything. Everything on the command line, including perhaps passwords. So there's a risk analysis to perform here. It is a security log, so meaning natively, locally, you have to be admin to see that anyways. There should be an implied level of trust in a SOC. I believe there should be. As all of us, as InfoSec professionals, we are often privy to sensitive things, but you should turn this on because the visibility it gives you is crazy awesome. And again, sunlight is the best disinfectant. Here's your sunlight, right? I was trying PowerShell Empire. I was trying PS Attack. Nothing. Like nothing. And normally when you have a breach, the dwell time I think is 140-something days per Mandiant in 2016. Dwell time, of course, how long the attackers are on your network before someone else tells you 2/3 of the time, right? And 140-something days. And normally when you go in and look at that stuff, post-incident handling, how do they know it's 142 days? Yep, there it was. This minute, this second, click, etc., right? Well, what if there's nothing there? Now, again, this is post-exploitation. So something bad already happened. The box was unpatched, user clicked, whatever, layer 8 strikes. But then afterwards, a lot of this post-exploitation is actually invisible. And 4688 gives you that sunlight. It lets you see this stuff. It is, in my opinion, the best event. If you put a gun in my head in a SOC, hold on. You put a gun in my head in a SOC and say you only get one event. I'd say 4688. Yes, sir. Yes. Is that available on servers too is a question. Yes. Yeah, it's pretty amazing. A lot of people don't know about it. It's newer, year plus, but Windows 7 Plus has it. In fact, again, there was a patch about a year plus ago, but all my client systems, as long as they've been patched in a year, if not, different discussion, obviously. Yeah, it's amazing. Do consider the risk of exposing data this way. But in my biased opinion, it is well worth that small risk to get the visibility you want. So you're doing that. What do you look for? Really long commands. And the beauty of really long commands, it's not a signature. It's behavior, you know. And as we all know, blacklists fail. Now, to be fair, DeepBlueCLI has a blacklist, a series of regexes, right? So blacklists fail. But if we have a combination, like net web client, download string, we'll look for that. We'll look for really long commands. We'll look for base64 encoded stuff. We'll look for base64 compressed and base64 encoded commands. We'll look for use of the C# compiler and the cbtres.exe, heavily used by PS attack. PS attack is invisible until you do this, and then it's everywhere. It's blatant, it's loud, right? It is herd of elephants loud. The Windows scripting hosts, command line, C script, run DLL, the usual menagerie of malware. And the beauty of this is pen testing tools do this. You know, I said on John's talk last hour, and he said, listen, most of these tools detect pen testers, which is cool, but guess what? Most people don't get owned by pen testers, they get owned, you know. So I thought a lot about that when he said that. I'm like, you're exactly right. But behaviorally, malware does this too, for sure. And again, this gives you the necessary sunlight. I think if you had one command to look at, one event type to look at, this is the one to look at. You can also do PowerShell logging. Now again, my use case was Windows 7, because I wanted it to be actionable for my clients, and Windows 10 is awesome, as I said. Unfortunately, PowerShell 2 on Windows 7 with very little logging. If you go to PowerShell 4, you get better logging. You go to PowerShell 5, even better logging. PowerShell 4 is good enough, actually, for me. You can get it running pretty painlessly on Windows 7. I did try getting PowerShell 5 on Windows 7 SP1, and I tried 3 times, and I partially failed 3 times. Now, I'll fully cop to layer 8 if that was me. PowerShell 5 worked, but going to 4, it worked, and the logging worked. Going to 5, I broke the logging 3 times in a row. And I'm sure I did something wrong. But again, my metric is if I can't figure it out, and I ran out of time for this talk, oh my God, I'll punt. My clients will probably have the same problem. So, but it turns out 4 is good enough. And if you figure out how to get it going on 5 with logging intact, please contact me. I'd like to know. But 4 is good enough. But it turns out, I thought PowerShell logging was going to be really key, but most of the malware is using CMD to launch PowerShell. So I already have the visibility from event 4688, right? I'm already there. So it gives us more visibility, more sunlight, which I like. As I mentioned, Emmett, here's Rob Joyce, Tailored Access Operations Group. If you haven't seen his Usenix video, Google NSA Usenix video. It's pretty amazing. Maybe we know that stuff, my clients don't. You know, the myth of the 0 day. Now, 0 days exist. They're not quite like Yetis or anything, but we all know it's not that hard, right? It's not that hard. You don't need 0 days when they have all this unpatched stuff. And he makes points about know thy network and all that kind of stuff. And he talks about Emmett. He's like, install it. You know, we need to, as defenders, as blue teamers, you need to look for these asymmetries. Things that you can do to make the attacker's job exponentially harder that are easy for you. So it takes me 10 minutes. It takes the attacker 24 hours now. I'm winning. And if I have Emmett, what they'll probably do is light up Emmett like a Christmas tree and then try to bypass it. And we'll talk about the perfect solution fallacy very shortly. And people say, oh, well, they'll do this. They'll bypass Emmett. Yes, after tripping over Emmett. And I'm watching for that. It's application event 2, service provider Emmett. So if you're looking for that, your SOC knows now. You know, if heap spray just killed something, they saw a heap spray and Emmett killed it, that should be a live event in your SOC, right? So the logs are actionable. Here it is, provider name Emmett, ID 2. And when I give PowerShell examples, because that's what they are here, clients like, yeah, I use Splunk, I use ArcSight, fine. Security log, application log, sorry. Provider name Emmett, ID 2. Your Splunk, your ArcSight, your QRadar, they can all find this stuff, right? So think about the technique, not necessarily the tool. So, you know, the script was born out of a need for my clients. When I gave them the list of the deadly events, look for these 10. And I don't look for an 11th until I've mastered the 10. And every one of those 10 has a use case. I'm not shoving 1,000 times 10,000 logs into a SIM and asking 2 junior staff to muddle through that. So every event in my SOC has a SIM, has a use case, sorry. And I wanted to hand them the script and say, here, just run this. It's native, it's PowerShell, run it. It's going to talk about some interesting stuff. So logging new process creation, very easy. However, many processes are launched on Windows every single day, right? So now you're generating a lot of data. I want quality, not quantity, so we need a way to cut through that. And I told my clients, hey, look for really long commands, look for base64 encoded stuff. And they're like, well, how do I do that? I write a script. crickets. Hey, just write a script, crickets. And it's, again, maybe you're that magic snowflake that John Strand referenced last hour. If you're like a ninja writing scripts in a SOC, you're very unusual. We have people entering stuff in GUIs and SOCs, large and mostly, right? So, and also I've noticed in SOCs, they're way too abstracted from the source data. The centralize, and ingest all this data through connectors. You get too far from the source data. Like most SOCs don't have full packet capture because full packet capture doesn't centralize easily, And so they actually reject it because it's in this one box, or not, right? Either it goes in that box or we don't look at it. So they end up rejecting perfectly good data. So I like to always make sure someone in your SOC is closer to that data. Now maybe a junior staffer entering ArcSight queries, but a more senior, experienced person, a blue teamer, they should be close to the data, right? And so I said write a script, and ultimately, I've realized if they're not going to do it, I need better advice. So I said, I'll write the script. It was an odyssey, it was a learning journey, right? As a Unix sysadmin from way, way back, it was definitely a journey of discovery. It's only about 350 lines of PowerShell, so it's hardly a monster project. That's like 320 lines more than I'd written before in one shot, Everyone talks about PowerShell objects and how Unix engineers admit PowerShell objects makes them cry, but they're powerful, right? Objects are more powerful than text, PowerShell is more powerful than Bash. Yes, I can say that. You heard me say that. And a few little trip-ups. The way functions return data is, well, different. And I kept having these assumed biases when I'm writing PowerShell. I, for example, assumed there was no plus equals in PowerShell because some other language the PowerShell reminds me of didn't have plus equals. I wrote half the project not using plus equals, and I'm like, hey, plus equal, awesome. Things like that, right? But, and ultimately it's like, okay, we'll just parse these objects as XML. We'll parse the XML. I'll look for these things, and easy, right? And it's not quite that easy. Now, it's not nasty hard either, but the parsing gets a little tricky. Some of the events are really well parsed, a nice little tree of XML go down. Some of the events are kind of blobs of text. But luckily, like I said, regular expression support is strong, right? Regular expression support is strong. So with a regex, I can cut through any blob of text. That's what regexes are designed to do, carve through blobs of text. So if the event data here or the data is blah, 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 and I only care about one line of that, enter PowerShell to regexes to save the day. A few design notes. It's designed, don't shovel data into a tool, out of a tool. I want actionable stuff. I want every event to matter. I'd rather have a false negative, I'd rather have less than more. So it wasn't like one big loop just churning through this stuff. Each event type had its own unique code to it. Virtually every event type requires its own code. Now the code's only 3, 4, 5 lines, but I need unique code for each event, which actually makes me move slower, justify the use case. And every single thing that DeepBlueCLI detects has a malicious use case for it. And those use cases are demonstrated in the EBTX files I share with DeepBlueCLI, okay? So you can see those use cases. Right now, it's super crazy basic output. I decided to focus on the features and demonstrate the hopeful value of this tool. It's the output is amateurish and basic, but it works, And we'll talk about next steps later on for DeepBlueCLI now that I've gotten this far to take it further, some of the plans. Now, speaking of the perfect solution fallacy, we hear this a lot, we fight this a lot. You come up with the way to detect something, and people are falling over themselves to find a use case that'll fail, Like, as soon as you say application whitelisting, which is actually a preventive technology, hey, let's do application whitelisting. Oh, they're going to inject the malware directly in a RAM, and it's like, yeah, I know. And people are literally falling over themselves in an effort not to change. It's crazy how change adverse many of our peers are. They built whole careers delaying and stopping change. They sit in change management boards saying, hey, we need to think about this more. Hey, we need to be prudent, And what they're doing, they're corrosive. They're outwardly corrosive and harmful to your security. People camping on a change management board is delaying change. I spent a lot of my career fighting change, fighting people who are fighting change, I should say. And any given use case, yes, rename Mimi cats, Mimi dogs, of course. However, long commands downloaded through NetWeb client, download string, more behavioral mixing and with the more signature. Now, we literally look for the string Mimi cats. Yes, that's a blacklist. Can you evade that? Of course you can. However, can you evade all of it, right? So I've coined the term the perfect attacker fallacy. This is the omnipotent attacker who will psychically anticipate every single preventive and detective measure you've deployed, countermeasure you've deployed, and psychically anticipate it and avoid it without leaving any tracks. This person doesn't exist. They're a myth. They're a cartoon supervillain, right? They don't exist. It's not real. I don't care if you're the NSA. I don't care if you're a criminal hacking gang. I don't care if you're nation state. Thank you. The attacker isn't that good because they don't have to be that good. They don't, right? And I love Grace Hopper. Grace Hopper is a hero of mine, a true American hero. Enlisted in the Navy in 1942. Had to get a waiver because she was 15 pounds under the 120-pound weight minimum. Invented the compiler. Had to convince people that computers could do more than add, right? And the term debugging, courtesy of Grace Hopper, from a moth, of course, famously. And she spent a lot of her career fighting change, convincing people that computers could do more than add. Convincing people that, hey, instead of writing the machine code directly, we can write higher level code and have the computer do the rest. People are like, what? That's crazy talk, you know? So she spent lots of her time fighting change, or fighting people who were fighting change, right? And this is one of the biggest challenges I have going into SOCs, going and talking about SIMs. I recommend all this stuff, and people are falling over themselves to kind of find out a use case that could evade it. And yeah, any one control could fail. It's called the perfect solution fallacy because the perfect solution fallacy says a solution is not useful unless it's perfect in all use cases. If we believe that, we wouldn't have firewalls or antivirus or anything. We wouldn't patch, none of that stuff, right? So it's clearly a fallacy, yet people fall over themselves to shoot great ideas down. So that's one of the battles I've fought with my SIMs and my SOCs and my clients, is convincing them to try something a bit different. So here's a list of detected events. Designed to be actionable, designed from real-world events, informed by my consulting, post-incident handling. When I come in and do a little purple teaming, as Carlos Perez said, and I try to help, I try to heal, I try to fix. I've already broken things. Now let's spend some time fixing things. And I go to the SOC. Here's what happened. I created a new user, added them to main admin. Here's a service that was created when I launched PS exec. Here's this, here's this, here's this. I achieved persistence. Here's a registry run key, right? And so inform from that, whether it's malware or pen testers or whatever, a list of, actionable list of about 18 odd 20 things, right? That it will automatically handle all this stuff. Has a list of regular expressions. You feed it into a CSV file. I saw Ben 10 mention that you could do the download string via file : whack link. I didn't know that. Awesome, right? Like, cool. And so I updated DeepBlueCLI to do that because I would have missed it before, right? Although I have to share that with GitHub. That's local because I did that like 2 hours ago. So I'll do an update tonight and you'll see that. So very flexible. The beauty of the regex, this is going over mostly command lines, also PowerShell, also service creation events, or the names associated with service creation events, the names of the services. And you don't even have to edit the tool, just throw in a new regex, right? And if any of these false, just comment it out. You know, maybe you use the C# compiler, and maybe you use that. So maybe you want to turn that one off. The beauty of that, it's a simple configuration change. In fact, a simple configuration change, my clients who don't have ninjas can do this, right? That's my goal, right? And also supports a whitelist. So does benign software make crazy long processes? Yeah, they do. Google especially loves doing this kind of stuff. And initially it jumps out at you as being evil, but then you see what it is, and you perhaps upload that exe to VirusTotal, and VirusTotal says probably harmless, you know. And so we do have normal software running crazy long commands of base64 encoded stuff. So we added a whitelist. And the whitelist is also a CSV, very, very simple. Of course, there's an evasion technique if someone uses a whitelist command in the middle of their malice, you know, but so make the regex strong to kind of avoid that, or at least make that harder. Another thing DeepBlueCLI does, instead of just showing that blob of base64, it'll decode it. And usually like PowerShell Empire, boom, there it is. It's right there. And then sometimes it's compressed and then encoded, so it'll do that as well. Now I'm going to warn you, the output is not super slick at all, especially when I'm decompressing and unbase64ing the Metasploit stuff. It's just tons of text that fills the screen. But I decided not to get caught up on the form of the output. I wanted to focus more on the raw detection. So let's do some use cases now. How does this stuff stack up? So I did a SMB password guessing attack using John the Ripper's password.lst, 3561 entries, and that generated, if you turn that event on, 3561 events in a SOC, which in my experience are all missed because usually that event's not even turned on. You need to audit logon failures, right? Easy to do. So instead of hitting you with 35, 61 events, I'm going to give you one. Hey, a whole bunch of password guessing is going on. You have this many of those, right? So summarize, don't DOS. We also have PowerShell Empire. And thanks to a lot of these folks are here, so thank you for your awesome, awesome work. PowerShell Empire and tools like this scared me because it was leaving no footprints. Again, this is post-exploitation. Bad things have happened. But after that, it kind of goes invisible. It goes dark. And with native logging, there was nothing. And you have to remove these blind spots. You need to add more sunlight, right? So when DeepBlueCLI sees it now, it'll dump the command. Why is that command there? Because DeepBlueCLI has noticed it's a long command line. There's over 500 base 64 encoded characters. It's also running an encoded and hidden PowerShell command. Then it'll debase 64 that command and then inspect what's left there. It'll show you the actual command, and of course the crazy use of mixed case is always, notice how they spelled system.net.web client there. You know, very, very classic for these kind of tools. It'll then rescan the same heuristics against the now normalized command. It says, oh, in addition to all the things I told you before, it's also using net web client download string, and they're setting a user agent on the command line, which is usually not a good thing for you, right? Yeah, how much normal software sets a user agent on the command line? Not much, but malware reliably does. So we'll look for that. It's an easy string to look for. So of course, Metasploit. In this case, it's not just a pen tester's tool. We see black hats use Metasploit. I've handled cases where Metasploit was extended with 0 days by very advanced teams. My clients have been on the receiving end of that. So while Metasploit, of course, is an easy thing to test, it is useful for real-world results because I've seen black hats use it as well. So this is the newer, well, this is the older native upload, right? This is the older native upload, meaning fat exe drops in the file system, goal line defense by your corporate antivirus solutions to stop that, right? And so this is the older method. Metasploit 2 years ago used this by default. And then we did a typical pivot. You know, I always type get system. I always type, you know, hash dump. It's like muscle memory. I'm typing this, load Mimikatz. I'm going, you know. And so I wanted to model that. What does DeepBlueCLI make of all this? Well, notice a 16-character service name that's exclusively upper lower alpha. And it also notice the system root. It's % system root % / 8 characters mixed case.exe every time. Now, of course, an attacker can change this. You can change all of this. But one thing I've learned in my career, defaults are powerful. Defaults tend to stick. You know, port 4444, we all know what that is, right? Metasploit. Oh, I can change that. Yeah, you'd be surprised how often it's not. You know, so defaults are powerful. And again, the fact that someone could dodge this easily, you could take 5 minutes and dodge this. I'm still looking for it. Also, when you type get system, it actually drops additional artifacts on that file system. It touches the file system a bit deeper, and it does this / / pipe / I think it's a 6-character lowercase name every single time. Now the name changes, but it's 6 characters lowercase every time. So we'll look for that. Now we'll do the newer, more modern PowerShell target, right? This is the more powerful one, doesn't touch the file system, creates a number of high-value events. This is the system log. You will actually get this one natively. No additional configuration needed. Notice that service file name there. So this is a typical event, 7045, and the service file name is crazy, crazy long. Then, of course, it's base 64 encoded compressed. We unwind all that and show you the results. Plus our new friend 4688 with similar goodness there once you start logging that event. We also have PowerSploit. PowerSploit, of course, launching Mimikatz. Again, in almost every pen test I do, if I've gotten in, if I can run a Mimikatz, I am. Every black hat, white hat I know does that. So we do need to look for that behavior. And so through the NetWeb, NetWeb client download string, it spotted that. It also spotted Mimikatz itself. Now the first one's using a short URL, as I mentioned. So, and then if I use the actual PowerSploit from the GitHub site, it triggers a couple other things, including the use of the word PowerSploit and the use of the invoke-mimikatz.ps1. And, you know, as far as dodging this stuff, in the wild, no one is right now, because hardly anyone defends this way. You know, this is not hard. This is just different, you know. And if a day comes where this tool is so successful that all the black hats start dodging it, well, you know, I guess that's good and bad. But I don't think it's coming anytime too soon. And again, defenders can more accurately match the attackers. Our preventer controls necessarily will be more conservative. Our detector controls can be more aggressive. And I've been doing this for a long time. And I've always been able to go toe-to-toe with the attackers, at least on the defense side. And I don't see that ending anytime too soon. PS attack was interesting because it doesn't actually use PowerShell. Well, it's kind of PowerShell without PowerShell. It's an interesting use case. So a lot of course, the vendors now are trying to detect use of malicious PowerShell. So what if we dodge that? It calls PowerShell directly through the .NET framework. This makes it harder for enterprises to block. Initially, when I ran it, this was deeper into me writing DeepBlueCLI. It still wasn't seeing it. I'm like, it was still invisible, even though I was looking at PowerShell, long commands, blah, blah, blah. It was still missing it. And then, of course, I had to dig deeper. And I realized what they were doing was using the C# compiler and CBT res to actually compile stuff on the fly on your system. So it's compiling this stuff on the fly on your system, and it does so in very, very repeatable ways. And like a lot of malware, the name of that temp folder is random, and the name of the .temp file says res B770 right there. It's always the same length, but it's randomly generated name, right? So we start looking for that. We say, hey, by the way, someone's using csc.exe, and also down the bottom now, they're doing it as PS attack would, right? So PS attack was interesting. And hot off the presses, a little glimpse of the future. Tomorrow, I noticed this on Twitter, invoke obfuscation. I'm like, ooh, shiny, cool, I need to look at that. And I tried to download it, it's not there yet, it will debut tomorrow. So I thought it'd be cool yesterday to detect a tool that hasn't been released yet. So that's what I did here, okay? Because, hey, go big or go home, right? So I'm looking at this, I'm like, ooh, shiny, and regexes to the rescue, right? Now, you want to be careful with regexes. Regexes, they're like angry gods. Don't anger them, okay? Because if you anger the regex gods, they'll consume all CPU and destroy your system, okay? So I'm like, oh, that's easy. I'll just do a regex with like a parentheses, star dot comma, and then more than, say, 20 of those. And I hit enter, and it's like, well, that's taking a long time, and I'm like, click, 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 clickety, clickety, click, and four virtual CPUs all consumed, I'm like, and this is yesterday, and I'm like, I just broke my tool. It's like, thump, 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 thump. I'm like, I'm so screwed, right? Here's a cool tool that doesn't work. All right, thanks, folks. See you later. No, because I hadn't changed the code, but I changed the regex. I'm like, oh, the regexes are destroying all worlds. Okay, so I did a simple cop-out. Now, if you see this code have an improvement, I'm willing to bet there's an improvement. I just took the string, and then I took the string, removing the pluses, and I compared the two strings. Real easy on the CPU, not super leak coding regex style, but it was a breeze on the CPU, and it works. So now I've got to test a tool that hasn't been released yet, right? So here's a stock, total shout out, since I'm using his technique, I'm detecting his technique before he deployed it. At least I can do is give a shout out to his talk. So check it out at noon tomorrow. And I also need an exploit, and I don't really have an exploit. So if you're wondering what I'm thinking about as I try to type a screen full of data, this is what I'm thinking about here, okay? So I'm just typing stream of consciousness because it's late last night, and I want to go see dual core. And I just typed for a while. That's all true, by the way. And AD&D for the win. Yes, yes. Dungeon Masters unite. Unite. That's right. The original AD&D, please. Come on. All right. And so it detected it, right? As you see here, I kind of flew by that slide because I was excited about Dungeons & Dragons. Sorry. So it said long command line. Now, to be fair, it would have detected it either way based on the length of that command. So out of the box, DeepBlueCLI would have spotted that. But I decided to add the additional logic of pluses. Now, there's a lot more than pluses in this command, of course. There's all kinds of stuff in there. There's single quotes, there's double quotes, there's backticks, there's everything. However, I thought if it's all stitched together with pluses to obfuscate, I'll just look for the pluses, right? So it noticed over 25 pluses as well. So I was pretty happy that I believe it would have detected this tool. I won't know till tomorrow, but I believe it would have anyways. And then with the added code, yet another obfuscation technique is now reliably detected. All right, so next steps and then a demo. So like I said, the output's crazy basic, admittedly so. And next step is to separate the detection engine from the reporting engine. I think that makes sense. So have the raw detection, that way you're not tied to text or CSV or whatever. And have the raw detection and be able to feed that into other tools. And then the reporting engine, which will work off of that. I already talked to Justin Henderson about integrating into SoftElk. If you're not familiar with SoftElk, that's a blue team and forensics, network forensics distro based on Elk. And a lot of the biggest sites, when they outgrow their SIM, when you're handling terabytes of data, petabytes of data, that's Virginia Tech University, there's no commercial SIM that actually scales that big, but Elk does, right? Elk does. So we're seeing a lot of work move towards ELK now. And Soft ELK is again, network forensics and Blue Team distro. And I've already talked to Justin Henderson, who's one of the developers there. And he actually reviewed my talk, caught a few typos, and said, hey, I'm putting this in Soft ELK. I said, you be your own bad self, man. Do it, right? So I will work on him with that. And another thing I have is I have a domain that's 15 years old that I used to use for email, and then I got a Gmail account and I stopped, right? And but I have, like, you know, back when we ran your own mail server, and some of you probably still do, but I have like a 15-year-old domain. The MX records have been disabled for like 10 years, but it had been exposed to every spam list out there. So just for grins, I turned the MX record back on, and in 60 seconds, I had like 5 pieces of malware roll right in. So I've been spooling that stuff up for about 4 months now. And my next step is I'm going to sit down with a clean Windows 7 image, channel my true inner user, and click on all the things, right? Yes, I agree, of course. Yeah, I have antivirus. My PC's infected. Oh no, click here, yes. And I'll install remote helper object. I'll do all that kind of stuff, you know. And I'll channel my true CFO, and I'll do all those things. And and then I'll see what's lying beneath, right? And so I didn't have time to do that for now, but I think we have good enough stuff now. So the next stage, the stage 1 was a heavy focus on pen testing tools, and I'm mindful of what John Strand just said. Phase 2 for the detection is a whole ton of malice, actual raw malice, and then seeing what it looks like there. I think DeepBlueCLI do pretty well behaviorally. I think there's definitely room for improvement. So kind of a 2-phase approach of separating the detection engine from the reporting engine, and also, again, more actual malice, more use cases. And every step along the way, if I find something that works, we'll update GitHub. I'll drop a new EVTX there as well. That way you can ingest it in your tools and check it out as well. All right, so hey, what could possibly go wrong? All right, so since my microphone already broke, I am tempting the demo gods for sure. So I'll keep it kind of short here. So you can't see that, of course. So here's DeepBlueCLI. And it can process the security log, depending on the size of the log. It may chunk along for a while. And while that's going, I can type some other stuff here. While you're looking at that, okay, it's back. So here is the live security log. Many bad things have happened to the system, of course, right? I've been naughty. I've been a bad boy. And this poor Windows 7 system did nothing to deserve any of these things. And again, the output's a bit, this is me testing invoke obfuscation by setting lots of pluses at it, just to see if I could detect that. This is me testing that string I sent earlier. This is me fixing some typos in that string. And because you're going to type a long, crazy diatribe, you should at least be syntactically correct, right? I think I owe it to everyone to do that. And you can also give it a log name. I can do -log system. And it'll go through the system log. You can also give it EVTX files. So I'll go EVTX/PO, whatever. PowerSploit, that's the security log, by the way. That's PowerSploit from the security log. And again, here's a base 64. Here's a Dakota base 64, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You can feed it. I got a whole bunch of use cases in here. Metasploit, whatever. Share with the security log for a native target. Pretty brief there. That's the security log. You can also look at the system log, et cetera. So you get an idea here. I'll leave it on that for my demo because I've got this far without blowing up. So I'll call that good. And I'm pretty excited about it. And I'm pretty excited to be at DerbyCon. And again, I'd love your help on this stuff. It's open source license, all that kind of stuff. So I'd love to get some more collaboration going on that. And how we doing on time? I think we're good. So yeah, that's good. Thank you, folks. Thank you very much.